For our regular Polly panel, we're joined live by MP from Queensland, Annika Wells, and also Andrew Bragg is joining us, I believe, from Sydney. There we go. Oh, from Canberra. There you are, Andrew.
Canberra.
Welcome, guys. Now, top of the agenda this week, ensuring integrity. Big win for the government if they can get it through. Annika, you've got some doubts about this legislation.
I do. It's a bill designed to prevent workers from organising, and the penalties for union organisers and unions for doing the wrong thing compared to their corporate counterparts is ridiculous. It allows unions to be shut down for submitting paperwork late. The penalty for submitting paperwork late if you are a company is an $80 ASIC fine. George Columbaris stole $7.8 million from workers, $7.8 million in stolen wages. He gets away with a $200,000 contrition fee. No one's telling him he can never work in a restaurant again. But the penalty from this bill, if you are a union person who submits your paperwork late, is that you could never work for a union again. So I'm not having it. It's not on. It's not fair.
Andrew, what do you make of that? Is it just punishing people for being sloppy with their paperwork?
Well, like, the union movement owns the Labor Party, so the Labor Party won't be able to look at this with clean hands or come to this issue with clean hands. I mean, the fact is that the CFMEU have been fined $16 million in recent years by court. So they treat laws like speeding tickets. And so our view is that the laws need to be strengthened, bad people need to be deregistered, and ultimately poorly performing unions really shouldn't be in business.
What do you make of Annika's point, though, that in the corporate sector you get away with a lot of those kind of parking fines that you're saying that the unions are treating them as? I
think it depends what sector you're in. I mean, certainly in the finance sector there have been very stringent laws put in place in relation to financial sector executives under the BEAR regime, as it's known. And I think the corporate law regime in Australia is very tight, and I think what we're trying to do is really level the playing field here. I mean, unions have a very, very privileged position. I mean, they are allowed to represent workers to the exclusion of any other union. So they really are a closed shop regime in many ways. So that privilege should be treated properly.
Annika, what do you make of that? Do you think corporate Australia has got enough fines to keep it in line?
Well, that closed shop statement by Andrew is factually inaccurate in many sectors, but the point that he just threw off the cuff is exactly mine. He's saying, look how horrendous the CFMEU is with $16 million in fines. But my point is that George Columbaris and employers who do the wrong thing by their workers get away with things like $200,000 contrition statements when they've stolen $7.8 million in wages. That's my point. These people, the penalties that unions and union organisers and union workers suffer and are proposed to suffer under this bill are so much more stringent than the people who do the wrong thing in the corporate sector than the bosses. That is what is unfair about this bill. I'm glad that Andrew and I are on a unity ticket on that front.
That's not what I said.
Unity ticket, Andrew?
Yeah. No, we're not. Obviously, we're not. And I think it is important that workers know that unions are doing the right thing by workers and not lining the pockets of the union bosses or going into the street and threatening people like John Setka has done, like threaten government officials. I mean, this is outrageous behaviour. The law is clearly insufficient and it needs to be strengthened.
Now, if we move on to...
And I will say, Andrew and I... can I make one more point, please? Andrew and I are on a unity ticket about this because at the end of the day, what a union is a group of people working together to achieve a common goal. Andrew used to work for the BCA. It's the union for businesses. This government doesn't have a problem with people working together to achieve common goals. This government doesn't have a problem with unions when they're on the side of the employers or the side of the LNP. This government only has a problem with unions when they're on the side of workers.
Any last word there, Andrew?
You'll find that 90% of people actually work for the private economy. So we support all businesses, big and small, and we also see a role for unions. But we don't think unions should be doing the wrong thing by workers, and we don't think that union officials should be able to steal money and threaten people.
Okay, we will move on from there. The big discussion this week has been about the bushfires and whether they are linked to climate change and whether now is the appropriate time to be having that discussion. Annika, do you think that we should be talking about climate change while the bushfires are still raging?
Oh, this is a pretty close to home one for me. In Kedron Brook, we have the Emergency Services Hub. They're the people who look after disaster response for the whole of Queensland. So they are there right now, looking after I think it's 11 bushfires still raging across our state. Those people live near me. They're local workers who live in my community, and some of them came to my mobile offices a couple of weekends ago to say that they're really worried about the resourcing that emergency services workers need, because what used to be seasonal work, cyclone season and bushfire season, is now a year-round concern. I mean, we had bushfires here, you'll remember, in the first week of spring. The rainforest was on fire, Binnaburra burnt down. So I guess I don't think, I mean, you know, I'm someone who believes in the climate emergency, but I don't think that this is the week to try and convince doubters or assign blame. I think this is a week for politicians to consider what more we can do to resource our emergency services and our emergency services workers, who at the end of the day have to manage these disasters and look after all of us.
Andrew, do you agree?
Well, firstly, I know that Annika will do a really great job and be very pastoral in acquitting her responsibilities as fires emerge in her electorate. And I think there's been a lot of provocation in the Senate this week, or attempted provocation, and it's just not the week to be getting into politics when people have died. And I know that there are still, as Annika said, fires raging in Queensland. So it's just not the time or place.
So what do you make of these emergency services leaders who've been petitioning the government, saying that they were trying to meet with the Prime Minister, he didn't want to meet with them? Is now the time for them to be doing that, or should they be focusing on the on the bushfires?
Well, the emergency services organisation that you're referring to, I think, have been offered a meeting by Minister Taylor and have now accepted a meeting with Minister Littleproud. And I think that was what they were wanting to do. They wanted to have a meeting with the government, which I think is now going to happen.
I think they were saying they wanted a meeting with the Prime Minister well before these bushfires took off. Annika, do you think that they should have met with the PM, or the PM should have made time for them before these bushfires took off?
I think, again, this isn't a week for us to be apportioning blame. This is a week for us to be considering what resources are needed moving forward. I think that our changing climate in Australia is an environmental and economic and a public health emergency. Clearly, more resourcing is needed to both combat the immediate disasters and try and prevent them from happening again. Let's use this week and coming weeks to talk about what, particularly our federal government, but what all levels of government can do to support our services more.
And the federal government has been saying that a lot of this does lie at a state level, but one of the other places that they are saying that is in the economy, because we've got Josh Frydenberg giving another speech this week talking about stimulating the economy. Andrew, do you think that the government is trying to sidestep its responsibilities with slowing growth by saying that it's up to the states to be putting the money down?
I think we're always looking for ways to increase private investment, which is why we're looking at the industrial relations system, for example. I think having a discussion about productivity, having a discussion about the way that the federation works is good. Clearly, there are a lot of inefficient taxes which the states rely upon. And although federalism reform has been talked about by probably a dozen prime ministers, it is a bit of an unfinished symphony. So I think, as the Treasurer has pointed out, we've made great progress in getting to national corporate law regimes and the like, but there is always more to do on the tax side when the states rely on a bed of very inefficient taxes.
Annika, in light of wages growth in this week in particular, I'm sure you think that there's a bit more the Treasurer could be doing?
Well, I think Andrew just used the word discussion 4 times, and the Treasurer is bringing out a discussion paper today. I think people want a plan and they want some action. He wants the feds and the states to row together, I think is the quote from the Treasurer. The biggest infrastructure program in Queensland is Cross River Rail. It is a $5.4 billion project, a project that the Queensland government will be funding alone because the federal government will not come to the table on it. Federal Labor committed to 50-50, federal LNP are doing nothing. So I am reluctant to hear more discussion from the Treasurer when he won't do the baseline things to bring forward the vital infrastructure projects that we need. Here in the north side of Brisbane, the Treasurer has on his books the Lingfield Road intersection upgrade, which isn't due to have $1 spent on it until the 2026 financial year. So don't have a lot of patience for hearing about what the states need to be doing when the Fed won't do the base things that we need here on the north side to kick off our infrastructure projects, support local jobs, get more apprentices on deck.
Andrew, the government is saying that they are ready to give the states more money if they have projects ready to go. Do you think that's enough?
We're already spending $100 billion on infrastructure, and I think we'll always look at new proposals. But I think the point about the tax system really is that you've got this vertical fiscal imbalance whereby the Commonwealth raises most of the tax revenue, but the states spend the bulk of it. And that creates this problem where there is a lack of accountability, because it's very hard to tell, if you're a citizen, who exactly is responsible for schools and hospitals, for example. So I think, if we can look to try and align revenue raising with responsibility of service provision, I think that would be a good outcome, recognising that would take a long time and that federation surgery has been very hard to undertake.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there for today, but thank you so much for our poly panel, Annika Wells from Queensland and Andrew Bragg with us from Canberra today. Thank you.
Good to be with you.